He stood motionless, surrounded by 6 heavy-set stuntmen. The director yelled, "Action!" A heartbeat later, 3 men were on the floor groaning in legitimate pain, but when they checked the film reel, Bruce Lee hadn't moved. The camera saw nothing. To become a legend, the world's fastest man had to do the unthinkable: slow down. Soundstage 14. At 20th Century Fox Studios was a pressure cooker of stale cigarette smoke burning ozone from the massive tungsten lights and the raw, suffocating stress of a television deadline. It was the summer of 1966, and the Hollywood machine was churning out the pilot for the Green Hornet. At the helm was Ronald Donovan, a veteran television director who had cut his teeth on westerns and police procedurals. Donovan was a man who believed in a strict visual language. Punches were supposed to be wide-looping haymakers, thrown like a baseball pitcher winding up for a fastball. The good guy hits, the bad guy falls. The camera captures it all in a neat, digestible 24 frames per second. But Donovan had a problem, and his name was Bruce Lee. Cast as the sidekick, Kato Bruce was largely an unknown entity to the Hollywood brass. To Donovan, this young martial artist was a wild card, an untested variable in a highly controlled environment. "All right, let's reset," Donovan barked through his megaphone, wiping a bead of sweat from his forehead. He turned to Hank Sullivan, the burly, scarred stunt coordinator who had spent the last 10 years choreographing barroom brawls for John Wayne knockoffs. Hank talked to the kid again. "I didn't see anything on that last take. Just a bunch of guys falling over." Hank lumbered over to where Bruce stood quietly in his tailored chauffeur uniform. Bruce was relaxed, casually, stretching his calves, his face an impenetrable mask of calm. "Look, kid," Hank grumbled, chewing on a matchstick. "You gotta sell it. This is television. When you throw the right hook, you gotta pull your arm all the way back to next Tuesday. Hold it for a second so the audience knows it's coming, and then swing. And for the love of God, don't actually hit my guys." Bruce offered a polite, razor-thin smile. "If I pull my arm back to next Tuesday, Hank, a real opponent, would have hit me 3 times before I swung. It is inefficient." "I don't care about efficiency," Donovan interrupted, stepping down from his director's chair and marching over. "I care about what Mitchell can see." He gestured toward the director of photography, Mitchell Hayes, who was currently squinting through the viewfinder of a massive Panavision camera. Mitchell was a legend in his own right, a man who trusted his lenses more than his own eyes. "Bruce," Donovan said, trying to keep his temper in check. "This isn't a street fight in Hong Kong. This is an illusion. We need the illusion of speed, not actual speed. Do you understand? Let's go again. Scene 4, take 12. Bruce nodded smoothly. "I understand, Mr. Donovan. I will give you what you need." The stuntmen took their marks. These were big men, former linebackers and amateur boxers, towering over Bruce's lean frame. The scene called for Kato to disarm a thug, strike 2 others, and deliver a spinning kick to a 4th, all within a matter of seconds. "Quiet on set," the assistant director yelled. "Roll sound, a camera rolling, and action." What happened next was a blur, literally. Donovan watched from his chair. He heard a sharp crack, the sound of a leather shoe snapping against canvas, followed by a flurry of muffled thuds. Hank's stuntmen were suddenly on the floor. One was clutching his chest, coughing. Another was rubbing his jaw, looking genuinely terrified. Bruce was back in his starting stance, completely unbothered, not a single hair out of place. "Cut!" Donovan screamed, throwing his script onto the canvas chair. "What the hell was that? I said action and you all just fell down, Bruce. I told you to throw the punch. Hank, why are your boys diving before the hit?" Hank jogged over, looking bewildered. "Rich, he hit them. I swear to God he hit them." Donovan stormed over to the camera. "Mitchell, did you get any of that?" Mitchell Hayes pulled his eye away from the viewfinder, his face pale. He slowly took off his thick-rimmed glasses and wiped them on his shirt. "Rich, I didn't see it. One second he was standing there, the next second the boys were on the deck." "What do you mean you didn't see it?" Donovan demanded. "You're looking through a piece of glass." "I mean the shutter," Mitchell said softly, his voice trembling with a mix of awe and dread. "I don't think the camera caught it." Donovan scoffed, refusing to believe it. "It's a Panavision, Mitchell. It catches bullets. Print the dailies. Rush them. We're screening them tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. I'm going to prove to this kid that he's ruining my show." The next morning, the projection room in the basement of the executive building was freezing cold and thick with tension. Donovan sat in the front row, holding a styrofoam cup of black coffee. Mitchell Hayes sat beside him, nervously tapping his foot. In the back row sat Kevin Marshall, a ruthless studio executive who wore his expensive suits like armor. "This better be good, Ronald," Marshall hissed from the darkness. "We are already behind schedule, and William Dozier is breathing down my neck about the budget. Show me this Chinese kid is worth the headache." "Roll it," Donovan instructed the projectionist. The projector whirred to life, throwing a beam of dust-filled light onto the silver screen. The clapperboard snapped. Scene 4, Take 12. On screen, the stuntmen surrounded Bruce. "Watch closely," Donovan said, leaning forward. The action commenced. On the screen, Bruce Lee stood perfectly still. Then, for a fraction of a second, the image of his right arm seemed to glitch, a weird, smeared anomaly in the film grain. Instantly, the stuntman in front of him violently snapped backward, flying off his feet as if hit by an invisible truck. Another glitch, a blur near Bruce's leg, and 2 more stuntmen crumpled to the ground. Bruce's image stabilized, showing him standing calmly exactly where he had been a moment before. The projection room was dead silent, save for the mechanical clicking of the film reel. "Rewind it," Mitchell Hayes whispered. "Play it frame by frame." The projectionist obliged. They watched the footage click past one single frame at a time. Frame 1, Bruce's fist is at his hip. Frame 2, a smeared blur in the empty air. Frame 3, the stuntman's jaws distorting from a massive impact, his head whipping back. Bruce's fist is already back at his hip. "Good God," Mitchell breathed out. "What is happening?" Marshall demanded, standing up. "Is the film defective? Is the lens broken?" Mitchell turned around to face the executive. "No, Kevin, the equipment is perfect. Film runs at 24 frames per second. For half of that time, a mechanical shutter drops down to block the light so the film can advance to the next frame. It means the camera is blind for 1/48 of a second, 24 times a second." "Speak English, Mitchell," Marshall barked. "Bruce Lee is too fast," Mitchell said, his voice laced with disbelief. His punch started and finished entirely within the dark phase of the shutter rotation. He struck, made contact, and retracted his arm in less than a 24th of a second. To the camera, the punch never happened. He is literally invisible to our technology. Kevin Marshall slammed his fist onto the back of Donovan's chair. "Fire him!" Marshall ordered, his voice echoing in the small projection room. "I don't care if he's the second coming of Wyatt Earp. If we can't capture him on film, he's useless to us. We cannot broadcast a ghost recast the part. Get me a gymnast, a dancer, someone from the backlot who knows how to throw a TV punch." Donovan's heart sank. Despite his frustration with Bruce on set, the director possessed a filmmaker's intuition. He knew he had just witnessed something entirely unprecedented in the history of cinema. Recasting Bruce Lee would be a catastrophic mistake. They had lightning in a bottle, even if the bottle was currently failing to contain it. "Kevin, wait!" Donovan pleaded, standing up to block the executive's exit. "Give me 48 hours. Let me talk to the kid. If I can't get him to adapt to the camera by Friday, we'll recast, I promise you." Marshall glared at him, checking his gold Rolex. "Friday afternoon, Ronald, or I'm pulling the plug on your whole unit." Later that afternoon, Donovan made his way to Bruce's small, Spartan dressing room. The door was ajar. Inside, Bruce was not resting on the small cot or reading a script. He was performing 2-finger push-ups on the hard linoleum floor, moving with a rhythm so steady and mechanical, it looked almost inhuman. Donovan knocked gently on the door frame. "Bruce, you got a minute?" Bruce smoothly pushed himself up, flipping to his feet in one effortless motion. He grabbed a towel and dabbed his forehead. "Mr. Donovan, is there an issue with the dailies?" Donovan sighed, closing the door behind him. He didn't know how to bridge the gap between his world of Hollywood artifice and Bruce's world of lethal reality. "Bruce, I'm going to be straight with you," Donovan began, leaning against the vanity counter. "Marshall wants to fire you. He thinks you're ruining the action sequences." Bruce's jaw tightened, a flash of genuine anger crossing his dark eyes. "I am hitting my marks. I am delivering exactly what the choreography requires. If your stuntmen cannot keep up—" "It's not the stuntmen, Bruce," Donovan interrupted gently. "It's the camera." Donovan explained what they had seen, or rather what they hadn't seen in the projection room. He explained the physics of the 24 frames per second standard, the mechanical limitations of the spinning shutter, and the cold, hard fact that Bruce's physical speed was breaking their equipment's ability to record reality. "You are too fast," Donovan said. "You're slipping between the frames. You're a phantom." For a long moment, Bruce was silent. He looked at his hands, his knuckles heavily calloused from years of striking wooden dummies and bags of iron sand. "You are asking me to go against my nature," Bruce said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of a lifelong philosophy. "Since I was a child in Hong Kong practicing Wing Chun on the rooftops, I have trained my body to eliminate unnecessary movement. Jeet Kune. Do my way of the intercepting fist is about directness. To wind up a punch to hold it in the air for a camera. It is a lie. It is bad martial arts. If I do what you ask, I am pretending to be incompetent. You're not fighting a duel to the death." "Bruce," Donovan countered, his voice rising slightly in desperation. "You are making television. What good is your ultimate perfect martial art if the audience sitting at home in Ohio just sees a blurry screen and guys falling down for no reason? They won't think you're a master. They'll think the show is cheap." The words struck a nerve. Bruce Lee's ultimate ambition was not just personal perfection. It was to show the Western world the true beauty and power of Chinese martial arts. He wanted to break the stereotypes of the shuffling, subservient Asian characters that plagued Hollywood. But if the camera couldn't see him, his message would be lost. Just then, there was a knock on the door. Mitchell Hayes stepped in, lugging a heavy metal Arriflex 35mm camera in his arms. "Sorry to interrupt," Mitchell said, setting the heavy camera down on a small table. He looked at Bruce with a newfound profound respect. "Bruce, Ronald is right. You are moving faster than the technology was designed to record. But I've been thinking." Mitchell walked over and gently tapped the side of Bruce's arm. "You view the camera as an enemy, a machine that cannot keep up with you. But what if you viewed the camera as your sparring partner? You wouldn't use your full lethal speed against a novice in the dojo, would you? You would control your speed. You would guide them." Bruce stared at the cinematographer, the gears in his mind clearly turning. "You want me to teach the camera how to see me?" "Exactly," Mitchell smiled. "Don't just fight for the stuntman in front of you, fight for the lens. I brought this Ari. Let's do a test, right here, right now. Just you and me, no stuntmen. I'm going to roll at 24 frames. I want you to throw your punch, but I want you to paint it across the air for me. Give it a beginning, a middle, and an end that the shutter can capture." Bruce stepped to the center of the cramped dressing room. He closed his eyes, inhaling deeply. He was being asked to deconstruct a lifetime of muscle memory. He had to artificially insert micropauses into fluid motion. He had to consciously slow the firing of his fast-twitch muscle fibers. "Roll camera!" Bruce said, his eyes snapping open. Mitchell hoisted the Arriflex onto his shoulder and hit the trigger. The mechanical whir filled the small room. Bruce moved. He threw a combination of back fist followed by a straight right. But this time, it was different. He didn't just slow it down. He performed a masterclass in kinetic tension. He extended his arm, visibly tensing the muscles so that the power was clearly telegraphed, allowing his fist to hang in the air for a fraction of a millisecond longer, at the point of imaginary impact, before snapping it back. He added a dramatic wide stance, his eyes locking intensely onto the imaginary target. He didn't just throw a punch, he posed the punch. Mitchell stopped the camera, lowering it slowly. A massive grin spread across his weathered face. "I saw it! Through the glass! I saw every inch of it!" Donovan let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "Can you do that in the alleyway scene with the stunt guys?" Bruce looked at his fists, a slow, confident smile breaking through his earlier frustration. He was realizing that film wasn't about reality. It was about enhanced reality. By slowing down, he was actually making his strikes look devastatingly heavy on screen. The slight pause allowed the audience's brain to register the danger just before the impact. "Mr. Donovan," Bruce said, buttoning his chauffeur jacket, "tell Hank to get his boys ready. We're going to make some television." Friday morning arrived with the suffocating heat typical of a Southern California summer, but the atmosphere on Soundstage 14 was entirely freezing. It was D-Day. Kevin Marshall, the studio executive with the power to end careers with a flick of his fountain pen, sat in a canvas chair just behind the camera dolly. He checked his gold Rolex, his face a portrait of impatient skepticism. "You have 1 hour, Ronald," Marshall stated, not bothering to look up from his notepad. "If I see another blurry mess, I'm calling William Dozier, and we are pulling the plug on this casting experiment. We shoot the master, we check the gate, we move on." Ronald Donovan wiped his damp palms on his trousers. He looked over to Mitchell Hayes, who was meticulously checking the magazine of the massive Panavision camera. Mitchell offered a curt, reassuring nod. They had rehearsed this concept in Bruce's dressing room, but translating a theoretical camera trick into a full-contact multi-person brawl under the blinding glare of 10K tungsten lights was a different beast entirely. "Places, everyone!" Donovan shouted, his voice cracking slightly. Bruce Lee stepped onto the set. The alleyway was a masterpiece of Hollywood grit fake brick walls, strategically placed puddles of water reflecting the neon glow and overflowing trash cans. Bruce wore the iconic black chauffeur's uniform and the domino mask of Kato. He looked calm, but beneath the surface, a fierce, calculating intelligence was at work. He wasn't just fighting stuntmen today. He was fighting the mechanical shutter of a camera. Hank Sullivan's stuntmen, a trio of bruising ex-football players named Garrison, Miller, and Ford, took their positions. They looked nervous. The memory of Bruce's invisible, bone-jarring strikes from Tuesday was still fresh in their minds. "Listen to me, boys," Hank muttered to his team just before stepping off the set. "He says he's going to slow it down, but keep your guards up. If he forgets, I don't want to be writing accident reports all weekend. Roll sound, speed, camera, rolling, action." The scene commenced. Garrison, playing a mob enforcer, lunged forward with a prop crowbar. This was the moment of truth. Bruce did not simply react with the lethal economic efficiency of Jeet Kune Do. Instead, he initiated a profound physical translation. As Garrison swung, Bruce stepped off the center line, planting his feet wide to anchor the shot. He blocked the strike, but instead of immediately snapping a counterpunch in a microscopic fraction of a second, he breathed. He pulled his right fist back, engaging his latissimus dorsi muscles so violently that the fabric of his jacket strained. He held it there for exactly a quarter of a second, an eternity in a real street fight, but just enough time for Mitchell's lens to register the impending danger. Then he fired. The punch sailed through the air, visibly slicing the space between them. Bruce purposely flexed his entire arm, creating kinetic tension that simulated massive resistance. Right before his knuckles grazed Garrison's jaw, Bruce added a new element, something he had never done in a real fight. "Wata!" The piercing bird-like shriek echoed off the high ceiling of the soundstage. The kiai served a dual purpose. It focused his energy, and it provided an auditory cue for the camera and the audience, bridging the gap between sight and sound. Bruce's fist connected with the absolute barest whisper of contact, but his body language sold the impact as if he had swung a sledgehammer. He intentionally snapped his head and shoulders into the strike, holding his arm fully extended for a split-second hang time in the follow-through. Garrison, feeling the rush of wind and perfectly cued by the dramatic pause, launched himself backward. He hit the breakaway prop crates with a spectacular splintering crash. "Perfect!" Mitchell hissed from behind the camera. "Keep going!" Miller and Ford rushed in simultaneously. Bruce pivoted. He executed a sweeping high kick, his leg carving a graceful, deliberate arc through the air. He made sure the camera caught the extension, the perfect geometry of his form, before pulling the strike at the very last millimeter. Ford threw himself into a backward somersault, selling the illusion flawlessly. But then, the twist happened. In the complex choreography, Miller was supposed to swing a heavy prop pipe at Bruce's knees miss and stumble forward into a punch. But Miller's boot caught on a thick black electrical cable hidden under a puddle of fake water. The massive stuntman pitched violently forward, entirely off his mark, his skull hurtling directly toward the sharp, solid iron corner of a real lighting stand. It wasn't a stunt. It was a catastrophic accident waiting to happen. In that microsecond, the actor disappeared and the martial artist took over. The conscious effort to slow down evaporated. Bruce Lee's nervous system, honed by thousands of hours of relentless training, bypassed conscious thought. To Donovan Marshall and everyone watching reality, simply skipped a frame. Before Miller's head could crush against the iron stand, Bruce became a blur. He didn't just step, he teleported. His left hand shot out with blinding invisible speed, wrapping around Miller's thick collar. With a sudden explosive torque of his hips, Bruce arrested the 220-pound man's forward momentum, dead in its tracks, yanking him backward with physics-defying strength. Miller gasped, his face mere inches from the lethal iron corner. Without missing a single beat, without the director ever yelling, "Cut!" Bruce seamlessly transitioned back into his camera speed. He smoothly pushed the bewildered Miller back onto his feet, chambered his right fist with that new theatrical tension, and delivered a dramatically paced, beautifully visible hook to Miller's jaw. Miller, still terrified from his near-death experience, happily took the cue and threw himself to the mat. Bruce settled back into his martial stance, his hands poised, his chest heaving perfectly in time with the dramatic rhythm of the scene. He held the pose, locking eyes with the camera lens projecting an aura of absolute dominance. And "Cut!" Donovan yelled, his voice echoing in the stunned silence of the soundstage. For a long moment, nobody moved. The crew was paralyzed. They had seen the beautiful cinematic fight, but they had also witnessed that terrifying flash of true speed when Bruce saved Miller's life. Hank Sullivan rushed onto the set, pulling Miller to his feet. "You okay, kid?" Miller nodded, his face pale, staring at Bruce with a mixture of shock and sheer reverence. He caught me. I don't even know how he got there." Donovan turned slowly to Kevin Marshall. The executive's arms were no longer crossed. He was leaning forward in his chair, his eyes wide behind his expensive glasses. "Mitchell," Donovan asked quietly, terrified of the answer. "Did we get it?" Mitchell Hayes pulled his eye from the viewfinder, a massive, triumphant grin spreading across his face. "Ronald, we didn't just get it. We just captured lightning." The screening room was no longer a tribunal. It was a sanctuary of revelation. Monday morning, the dailies from Friday's shoot were queued up on the projector. Kevin Marshall sat in the front row, completely silent. William Dozier, the show's creator and executive producer, had been summoned from his corner office. Donovan, Mitchell, and Bruce sat in the back, the air thick with anticipation. "Roll it," Marshall commanded. The projector clicked, the screen filled with the gritty colors of the alleyway set. And then Kato moved. It was a revelation. By consciously slowing his strikes, by inserting those microscopic pauses and telegraphing his kinetic energy, Bruce had not diminished his power on screen, he had magnified it. The camera, previously blind to his speed, was now feasting on his technique. Every punch looked devastating. The deliberate tension in his muscles before the strike allowed the audience to anticipate the blow, creating a psychological dread. When the strike finally landed, accompanied by the dramatic reactions of the stuntmen and Bruce's piercing key eye, it felt like an explosion. And then came the moment with Miller. On screen, it looked like a stroke of choreographic genius. The audience saw Miller trip. They saw the danger. And then they saw Bruce intercept him with a motion so impossibly fast, it looked like a special effect, smoothly transitioning into a devastating counterattack. The contrast between the dramatically paced fight and that singular explosive burst of true speed created a visual dynamic that Hollywood had never seen before. It was raw, it was terrifying, and it was utterly captivating. When the scene ended and the film tail flapped against the reel, the room was dead silent. William Dozier slowly took his cigar out of his mouth. "Kevin," he said, his voice hushed. "Who the hell's this kid?" Marshall stood up, buttoning his suit jacket. He turned to look at Bruce sitting in the shadows of the back row. All his previous skepticism was gone, replaced by the calculating gleam of a man who knows he has just struck gold. "Ronald Marshall," said his voice echoing in the small room. "Cancel the recasting orders. Call wardrobe. I want Cato's mask redesigned to show more of his face. And call the writers. We need to double his screen time." Donovan let out a massive sigh of relief, slumping back into his chair. He looked at Bruce, who offered a quiet, respectful nod. When the Green Hornet premiered on September 9th, 1966, the dynamic of American television shifted overnight. The star of the show was supposed to be Van Williams, the handsome, square-jawed actor playing the titular hero. But the moment Cato stepped onto the screen and unleashed his beautifully choreographed camera-adapted martial arts, the world stopped watching the Hornet. Fan mail poured into the studio, bypassing Williams entirely and addressed to the mysterious, lightning-fast chauffeur. Bruce Lee had done the impossible. He had taken the ancient, highly guarded secrets of Chinese martial arts and translated them into a visual language that a Western audience could not only understand but idolize. He didn't just win over Kevin Marshall, he won over millions of viewers sitting in their living rooms. Years later, Bruce would return to Hong Kong and revolutionize global cinema with films like The Big Boss Fist of Fury and ultimately Enter the Dragon. He became a global icon, the patron saint of martial arts cinema. But the foundation of that cinematic empire was not built on his devastating speed. It was built on the day he realized that true power wasn't just about destroying an opponent, it was about communicating that power through a lens. He realized that the camera was not a barrier to his art, but an amplifier. He had to be like water. When poured into a teacup, water becomes the teacup. When put in front of a 24 frames per second Panavision camera, Bruce Lee had to become the camera. He had to sacrifice his ultimate reality to create an ultimate illusion. By slowing down to let the world see him, he ensured that the world would never forget him. He allowed himself to be captured on film, and in doing so, he captured immortality. Bruce Lee's legendary television debut proves that true mastery isn't just about raw power or blazing speed. It's about the profound ability to adapt. When forced to choose between his pride and his message, Bruce compromised his speed to let the world witness his art, transforming a camera limitation into cinematic history. Did this untold story of Bruce Lee inspire you? Hit the like button, share this video with a fellow martial arts fan, and subscribe to our channel for more incredible true stories from Hollywood history.